Hello class, we're going to continue along with the universe next door and address the topic of postmodernity. Now I recorded two lectures in the past on the subject, so I will make those available to you and post them on your section where you can put materials for success. And I would recommend that you do watch them after you watch this lecture. So what I did there was define what modernity is, and modernity and enlightenment are synonymous terms that I will be using, and then out of that, then you can begin to make sense of postmodernity. And so we have to understand what were the ambitions and the goals and the ideals of the Enlightenment. I number about 7 of them. They have to do with human progress, ability to know the truth. Christianity as such, just to explain that, would follow within the modernist claim that there can be an absolute truth and that we can have access to it, that our human mind is equipped to be able to understand the nature of the universe, and that all human beings have access to that knowledge. All that they need to do is to dare to know. And that is the way Immanuel Kant is going to summarize that in a very famous essay, and I will highly recommend it. I put it on your list of resources. It's called What is Enlightenment? Immanuel Kant, who was the most pivotal figure of the Enlightenment, came at the end of it, and he is called the Shiva figure of the Enlightenment. Shiva referring to the Hindu god, who is both creator and destroyer. And Immanuel Kant came at the end of the Enlightenment, and he pretty much undermined the project of the Enlightenment without knowing it yet. Later it became obvious that his work was very critical in undermining the reason's ability to actually understand the world. But what you're going to find there in that essay is that famous line, sapere ade, which means dare to know or dare to use your own reason, dare to grow up and own your own beliefs and embrace the possibilities of what can be known, and move away from that tutelage where you're being told what to believe by the church or your culture around you. So the Enlightenment is going to come with this very, very strong impetus to try to find knowledge and make knowledge available for the rest of mankind, and all human beings will be liberated by that. Well, unfortunately, the Enlightenment failed, and I explained that in the other lectures. And so now we find ourselves in an era called postmodernity, which is dated usually around after World War II, in essence, 1945 to the present. And to help you understand what postmodernity entails, I have given you a lecture by Ravi Zacharias that can give you at the beginning a sense of that. I have also given you a short essay taken from a book by Friedrich Nietzsche called On Truth and a Lie in an Extramoral Sense. Now, I have that writing in front of me, and it is a precious, condensed version of what the Enlightenment, what postmodernity entails. And I will read to you. I mean, I won't rob you of the delight of reading it, because Nietzsche's ability to communicate this concept is quite compelling. So what he does is he begins to raise questions, and he begins by claiming that the idea of knowledge itself was but the invention of this remote species that doesn't amount to much, whose existence is only here but at a blink of an eye compared to the rest of the universe, who has invented this notion that there is somehow truth and reality, and that these things can be grasped by the mind, and that they have forgotten about the fact that they invented it. So according to Nietzsche, somebody in the past began to raise those questions, let's say Socrates, who was his arch enemy in ancient Greece. And then all of a sudden we bought into that narrative that somehow there has got to be truth. There has got to be such a thing as the examined life. There's got to be virtue and happiness and the good, and that human life amounts to understanding the meaning of life, and how rationality is able to equip us to do that. But what Nietzsche is going to say, which by the way, postmoderns are mostly naturalists and atheists, and so they usually adopt the evolutionary theory of Darwin, and then they operate from that. So what Nietzsche is going to say is that we ourselves invented this concept and gave ourselves self-importance. Now he does it. I'll read a little paragraph to give you a sense of his rhetoric. He says, let me show you, it's the second paragraph on the first page. One may invent such a fable and still not have illustrated sufficiently how wretched, how shadowy and fleety, how aimless and arbitrary the human intellect appears in nature. There have been eternities when it did not exist. Notice he's a materialist, so he believes the universe is 14.6 billion years old, and we're just part of an evolutionary process. There have been eternities when it did not exist, and when it is done for again, nothing will have happened. For this intellect has no further mission than will lead beyond human life. It is human, rather, and only its owner and producer gives it such importance. So notice the idea of truth and universality and philosophy and theology, those are just simply self-made claims by human beings that we somehow believed is nonsense and give it importance, as if the world pivoted around it. But if we could communicate with a mosquito, so here's a way of ridiculing this process, the project of modernity, then we will learn that he floats through the air with the same self-importance, feeling within itself the flying center of the world. There is nothing in nature so despicable or insignificant that it cannot immediately be blown up like a bag by a slight breath of the power of knowledge. And just as every porter wants an admirer, the proudest human being, the philosopher, so he takes aim specifically at philosophy, who claims to be the lovers of wisdom, thinks that he sees on the eyes of the universe telescopically, focused from all sides on his actions and thoughts. So somehow we have this, what he calls the God eye perspective. Somehow we're able to kind of look at the universe at large and just contemplate it as a whole. All of that is a fantasy. It is a pitiful reality of our egocentric nature, of our self-imposed narcissistic tendencies. And he goes through that essay, and I invite you to read it. It's definitely worth your time. And then he ends, he questions the ability of the mind, of what are concepts and what are words, and how do we speak about what's called essences. When we say a flower or a leaf or a dog, we always think in terms of particulars. So if I say a dog right now, you will picture a dog. I can't have access to the dog that you're picturing. That's something that arose from your own experience. But all that we use is language, which is a signifier of a reality that doesn't really exist. All that we are left with are names and words, but there is no universal. There's nothing that all dogs hold in common. There are not essences. An essence is that which makes a thing what it is. So in logic and in the classical sense, when you spoke about the essence of a human is what all humans share equally everywhere and at all times. So that they all have that in common. Postmodernism is going to do away with that. And postmodernism is going to do away with even the concept of truth itself. There is nothing that can be known, nothing that can be defined. Everything is defer. Différence is the French term that they use, which means you never quite get to understand the thing as it is. We always use words to express the meaning of other words, but only those words only make sense within a certain context, and we never quite get to understand the thing itself, which is a very problematic concept that I wouldn't want to go much into it. So let me read the last two paragraphs so as to give you a sense of what Nietzsche means by this. He says, what then is truth? Now that's the heart of the matter. If truth doesn't exist, then reality doesn't really exist, then we are disconnected from the world as is. He says, truth is a mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, and anthropomorphisms. In short, a sum of human relations which have been enhanced, transposed, and embellished poetically and rhetorically, and which, after long use seem firm, canonical, and obligatory to a people. Truths are illusions about which one has forgotten that this is what they are. Metaphors which are worn out and without sensuous power. Coins which have lost their pictures and now matter only as a metal, no longer as coins. So It's a worn out conception, it's a falsehood, it's an empty shell. Truth is just simply um, the product of human imagination. It is a self-made reality. It is completely bogus. So there is not longer that conception of you will come to know the truth. Not even the idea, like in that movie by Tom Cruise when he says, you can't handle the truth. Here there is no truth to be spoken. There is not truth with capital T. There are only truths and what I like and my own reflection on things, and that is as far as it goes. And then he says, which is ironic, he says, we still do not know where the urge for truth comes from. Remember that he doesn't understand men being made in the image of God and needing to make sense of reality. For as yet, we have heard only of the obligation imposed by society that it should exist. So what he is making mention there is that society itself cannot operate without truth. He was very mindful, and I explained that in our previous lecture on nihilism, that once you remove God from the picture, then society is left to itself, and then at that point you have no point of reference by which to make sense of life. So it is the same thing with truth. And if you do away with it, then society itself must believe that there is such a thing as truth in order to function. To be truthful means using the customary metaphors in moral terms, the obligation to lie according to a fixed convention, to lie herd-like in a style obligatory for all. So truth is just a necessary evil that we have, but ultimately it does not exist. So I want you to go back and read this. I would like to also read briefly from this book, Truth Decay, which is a helpful introduction to postmodernism. And there is a small section there that I'd like to read before we go on. This is how he defines postmodernism. It says, postmodernism is so often presented as a radical departure from modernity that it is easily to miss the insight that postmodernity is. In many ways, modernism gone to seed, carried to its logical conclusion and inevitable demise. So this is what the tenets that he identifies. Postmodern thinking is in part a reaction against certain tenets of modernity, such as scientism. And that was scientism is the conception that science somehow will answer all of the truths of human life, and we know that that is a falsehood. But people that saw science as successful went for that. Rationalism, that all that we need is reason in the Cartesian sense, and then human progress as being inevitable, whereas we realize it is not inevitable. We can be set back 500 years were there to be a nuclear fallout. These tenets are based on concepts that are true. Rationality and scientific inquiry are valid means of ascertaining objective truth. And progress is both possible and desirable. So what Grotius is saying is these things are true, in fact, but the extent to which modernity exaggerated them. But modernism exaggerated these basic truths to the point of falsehood. It was believed that human reason could be completely objective, that scientific studies defines the limits of knowledge. Remember, what cannot be known scientifically cannot exist. Therefore, God cannot be known and doesn't exist. And that progress is inevitable when science and reason are our tools. Now, remember, Nazi Germany was the most scientifically advanced and technologically advanced culture of its time, and look at what they gave us. So this is not sufficient, and the modernists should have known it, and they failed to do that. Postmodernism has reacted by dismissing these modernist myths as cultural inventions of the powerful and the dominant. Quote-unquote truth is considered to be an empty concept but a powerful political tool. Rationality is dismissed as mere logocentrism, reason-centrism, and then white male construct, and science is deemed domineering and oppressive and unable to discern objective truth, and progress only describes whatever serves the interests and ideologies of the dominant culture. So postmodernism is going to reject those three things: reason, truth, reason and truth as one, science, and the idea of progress, given how clear it is the fact that we may in fact not be moving forward, but may in fact be exasperating our own condition. So those are a few of the tenets. I'll continue on with this discussion on postmodernism and then move on to Islam and the others. Bye.